we have another topic here, which is end user previews. Previews. It is a clause as in a statute or a contract by which a condition is introduced. So you have to provide some clauses. Some clauses, they are being provided to you by the end user, and you also provide certain clauses to the end user. And end user, they will also provide certain conditions to you, that what all they want from this project, what are their requirements, that all the end user who are ultimately going to use your project, they will tell you. And it has to be formed in the form of a contract between you, who is the developer of this project, and the end user. Now, an end client, it is an individual or the other element that consumes or utilizes the labor and products which are created by the organization. That means here, like we are talking about this project development. So, the business intelligence tool or the project that you have delivered, that is ultimately be given to the end client. So, end client is a person who is ultimately going to use your business intelligence tool. Along these lines, an end client, it might vary from a client. Since the element or the individual that purchases an item or the administration, it may not be the person who really utilizes it. So, there can be the difference between the end client and the client who are actually going to use your system. End client, the experiences and backing are vital as the outcome of the client situated items and the administration. So the experience of this end client, this is very much important because they are finally going to make usage of the tool provided to them. References to the end clients as clients, they are the most normal to the innovation businesses. Today, we refer to our end users or end clients as the clients only. So we have to have a proper contract between the end users and the developers, that what are both of their requirements, what do they actually want from each other. A proper contract in written has to be signed. Not only the verbal communication will help, not only with talking you can understand their requirement. You have to note down their requirement. According to that, you have to make a proper contract that what all their requirements are and what all you can deliver to them. So a proper contract has to be formed between the end user and the developer of the tool. Now, coming to OLAP, which is Online Analytical Processing. So OLAP server, it is based on the multi-dimensional data model. It allows the managers and the analysts to gain an insight of the information through the fast, consistent and interactive access to the information. Online analytical processing, it is actually multidimensional analysis tool with the help of which you can understand, you can use your data in a better way. So for the implementation of your project, you might have to store your data in a proper format. So that format can be your OLAP. On the OLAP, the data, it can be stored on multiple dimensions, and the retrieval of data, it becomes faster, it becomes easier and consistent. Now talking about implementation, OLAP implementation. Implementing OLAP system, if you are using, you are going to get certain advantages. Like if people ask you that why should we implement this OLAP into the business tool? So there are few advantages. The very first one is a high speed data aggregation and the pre-computation. It allows the executing complex query to answer rapidly. That means the execution of these queries will be done rapidly at higher speed. Why? Because in that OLAP, we perform number of computations at the early stages only when we are saving the data on it. That means like we have multiple dimensions here. We want to get the aggregate of this and this dimension, which is already stored in a computed form into the OLAP cube itself. So because it is computation, it is already being done. So whenever the query related to that will be executed, so that calculated result will be easily and retrieved. So the very first advantage of implementing OLAP is it provides a high speed. Second, advanced calculating. Advanced calculating, it provides opportunities to choose from numerous options for the data analytics and the extraction. Advanced calculating. With the help of this OLAP, we can do the calculation at a very advanced form. It provides our opportunities to choose from various options which are required for the data analytics. Today, like we have a lot of data into the organization, we have to do proper data analytics to retrieve the right result from there. So these advanced calculations, it can be very well performed with the help of our OLAP. Then, convenient data representation. Multi-dimensional data structure. Since OLAP is multi-dimensional data structure, it is convenient for simple data visualization and to analyze the data from different perspectives. So it provides us convenient data representation. Since it has multiple dimensions, so data, it can be analyzed from any perspective. So the representation of data, it can be done in a convenient format with the help of this OLAP. Then, comprehensible business term. No additional IT help. It is required for OLAP reports operation. We normally use the business term that we have been using. No additional IT help will be required for the OLAP reports operation. So this makes it a very beneficial thing to be used for the implementation into our project. Then profit growth. They increase the working efficiency, and so they will increase the profit. With the help of OLAP, we can definitely grow more. We can definitely profit more because it provides us a proper format to store our data, to retrieve our data, which help in proper analysis of our data, which is ultimately required for the decisions for the future planning of the organization. Then talking about the OLAP implementation. 2. The time implementation of the OLAP application. It is about to start. You already have its features and functions, its significance and consideration. So the only thing to do is to summarize it all up. We already know, we have already studied about the OLAP in a previous unit. We have talked about various features of OLAP, the significance of OLAP and various things we have already talked about in previous units. So now it's time to summarize this. Now you can start implementation process easily. Just follow a few guidelines for the OLAP implementation. If you want to now, since you know the advantages, you know the various features of OLAP, you know how it is going to work. So now it is a time for you to understand what are the steps that you should follow to implement it into the organization for the purpose of analysis. Step 1, that is dimensional modeling. The very first step for you to be done whenever you think about implementing OLAP for storing the data is to model all the dimensions. That means if we are talking about our product, so that product will have different dimensions. Like dimension means the product, it can be sold out at different location. We want to know the details of the product at different time spans. We want to know all the details about the product, the various features of the product. So for that, we need to do the proper dimensional modeling. That is the step 1. Talking about step 2, select the data required for removing into the OLAP system. We have to exactly sort out, since we have a lot of data, we have to exactly sort out what data should be required, should we keep onto this OLAP system, and what data should be removed. So that is the step 2 to actually sort the data. Now step 3. Data extraction for the OLAP system. For your OLAP system, you have to actually extract the data. That what all data would be required. You have to actually extract the data from various tools so that they can be properly loaded into the OLAP system. So after the extraction, the next step, step 4 will be loading. Now loading the data to the OLAP server. Like when we were discussing about this OLAP development, we talked about ETL. Extract, transform and load. First of all, we have to extract the data. Then we have to transform the data into a proper format. And after that, the data has to be loaded. So that is the step for loading the data to the OLAP server. Now coming to the step 5, data aggregation and derived data computation. Now we have to aggregate our data in a proper format. and we have to derive the computation of the data. If the computation of data it is already done, so it will help us into easy retrieval of the queries. Easy retrieval of whatever queries are being asked, the answer to them can be easily retrieved from the system. Now, step 6, it is the implementation of OLAP application on the desktop. Now, this OLAP implementation, it has to be implemented. Coming to the last and the final step, which is the user training organization. Now, the people who are ultimately going to use this OLAP structure, they have to be trained well so that they can analyze, they can understand the benefits, the various features of this OLAP. So, a proper training is a very important thing to be done. If the employees, they are properly trained, if the users, they actually know that what are the features, what are the advantages, how can they make better usage of this OLAP, so then only they will be able to utilize it in a proper format. So these are the few steps that are required for the OLAP implementation. So till now we have discussed about the deployment and the administration of our business intelligence tool. From now onwards, we are going to be talking about some of the things which are required for the security of our tool, of our databases that we have developed. So the very first thing here that we are going to be talking about is expanding the business intelligence authentication. See, authentication. Authentication is a process of determining whether someone or something is in fact who or what it says he is. Authenticating yourself. Like you can understand that whenever you have an email ID, whenever you are going to log in, you have to provide your username and the password. And it will be verified at the server end that is the password provided and the mail ID provided by the person, it is correct. So this process is called authentication. That means you are actually what you are saying. So that now your email, it cannot be used by any other person who is not knowing the password. So this process, it is known as authentication. Since our business intelligence, in this tool, we are storing all the information, all the data of the organization. So it is very much important for us to keep this data secure. Anybody who is coming, any user who is coming and asking to retrieve the data will not be allowed to do so. They have to provide their proper authentication for them to gain access to the data. So authentication, it is a process of determining whether someone is what he says he is. Authentication technology, it provides an access control for the system by checking to see if a user credentials, they match the credentials in the database of the authorized user or in the data authentication server. So at times we keep a proper server for ensuring data, which is known as a data authentication server. The task of which is to match the credential of the people. The credential like the username, his ID or whatever credential he provides there. So that has to be authenticated. And once the credentials are authenticated, then only that particular user will be allowed to use that resource or allowed to extract the data from that resource. Now we generally have two types of authentication. One is known as two-factor authentication. Another one is known as a multi-factor authentication. Talking about the two-factor authentication first of all. So this authentication, actually this is a process to make our data more secure, to make our tool more secure. Authentication in which a user or an organizational employee, they have to provide two factors to gain access to the business intelligence data. That means they have to provide two factors. BI two-factor authentication starts with the user submitting his username and the password. These are the two factors. Whenever the user, he wants to gain some data from our business intelligence tool, he has to provide this two-factor authentication. That which are they? He has to provide his username and the password. Once the user name and the password are provided, they will have to be matched with from the database that are this username and the password matching. If the credentials are matching, they are correct, then the user will be allowed to gain access to the business intelligence data. So this very first thing, it is known as a two-factor authentication, since here only we are using two things, the username and the password. Now talking about the multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, it is a security technology that requires multiple methods of authentication from independent categories of credential to verify a user's identity for a login or other transaction. So now this multi-factor authentication, it combines two or more independent credentials. That means now we are talking about more credentials, not only the username and the password. This will help. We require more than that. More than that can be what the user knows. The very first thing that has to be provided is what the user knows. That is like his password. He knows his password. That can be the very first factor for him to authenticate. Second thing can be what the user has, such as any security token or the OTP. Now, whenever we are talking about some online transaction, some OTP is provided to us, which is the one-time password. So this OTP, it will be sent only to the mobile phone of the person who the user is, who the real user is. So whenever you are performing these kind of online transaction or thing, you have to, along with providing your username and the password, you have to provide that OTP. If the OTP is not provided, then the person will not be allowed to make the transaction. So that is something what the user has. Or it can be the card also. When you go to the ATM, you have a card along with you. If the person is having the card, he has to swap his card. He has to provide his details like his password, his things. Then only the user will be allowed to access that particular ATM, that particular account from the bank. So what the user has, this is the second thing that can be used to authenticate him. And what the user is means using the biometric verification system. Like nowadays, we have biometrics everywhere. We have the thumbprints, we have the face recognition technology, we have the eye recognition technologies. So these are all what? These are all biometric verification method. These biometric, nobody else can access your data if there is a biometric technology of the thumbprint. You have to provide, the real user has to provide his thumbprint. And if the thumbprint, it is verified, then only the user will be allowed to access the data. So these are the ways to authenticate. Like today, here we are talking about this business intelligence data. So this tool, wherever it is going to be implemented, this particular tool will access all the data of the organization for the purpose of analysis. Now we cannot allow any random user to come and use this tool and access the data, check out the reports from them, do anything with the data, make changes into the data. Can we allow this? No. We have to provide proper authentication methods with the help of which the user, he will be able to use that data, to use that tool. Then we have authorization. Authorization, it is a process of granting the access to someone to do something. Authorize, that means you are authorized to do this. You can do this. Granting someone the access to do something. We are authorizing you to do this thing. It means it is a way to check if the user has a permission to use the resource or not. Now, there are a number of databases that we are going to have into the organization. There can be number of databases. Some databases may be related to the accounting department. Some databases where the information is being stored may be related to the marketing department. Some to the IT department. Is it possible for the people to access all the resources? Like marketing person, can he access the resources which are required by the accounting department? Can he access all the details of the various salaries related details and everything of the employees? Will marketing person have access to it? No. Since we have so much of data and it is divided as per the requirement of the people. So that is why we need to give the authorization. Authorization means when the person, it is being authenticated. Yes, you can use the tool. Now we have to grant certain access to certain resources only, which that particular user can access. We cannot allow that user to access all the resources. So now this task is known as authorization. It defines that what data and the information one user can access. And in short, we can call it auth Z also. The authorization, it usually works with the authentication so that the system, it could know who is accessing the information. Authorization, it is not always necessary to access the information available over the internet. Some data available over the internet, it can be accessed without any authorization. Like you can read about any technology from the internet. If we talk about the authorization on the internet, so we cannot access all the resources. Like if you are working on the tutorial of something, you are working on the tutorial. So at that point of time, to retrieve all the data from the tutorial, you have to log in into the system. You have to sign in into the system. And once you have signed in, then you can make use of those resources. The same process, it is followed onto our business intelligence tool also. There we have a lot of data, but we cannot allow every person to access all the resources. For accessing the resources, the people, they have to first of all authenticate themselves, and after the authentication, they will be granted access to only few resources only. So now granting this access, this is known as authorization. Now we have next thing, that is known as access permission. Access rights, these are the permission an individual user or the computer application, it holds to read, to write, to modify, to delete, or otherwise access a computer file, to change the configuration or the setting, or add or remove the application. Now access right, access permission, like there may be various end users who are using your business intelligence tool. Now they are granted the access to the resource. Now there you have to check, can they be making some changes into those data? Are they allowed to make certain changes into the databases related to the information? So we have to give some access permission to the people to use those resources or to modify or to change, make some changes into the resources. Like using the business intelligence tool, a report is provided to the CEO of the company about the product. Now the CEO, he has authority, he has the access permission that if he wants to change the product prices, he can do it. But a person who is working at the low level, suppose he is working into the administration task, does he have that access to change the price of various product of the organization, resources? No. So this is called access permission, that what things are permitted for you to be accessed and make some changes. Now, how access permission they are evaluated? When evaluating the access permission, planning gives a precedence in this order. The very first is the role level security. Users with the administrator role, they have access to all the application elements. Now here we are talking about the various permission, that in what order do we give permission to various people on the basis of their roles, what their role is. If a particular tool, it is being designed by the administrator, now the user with the administrator role, they have access to all the elements because they only have the authority to allocate these resources to the people. So the very first thing is the role level security. That is important, that as per your role, you will be allowed, you will be given the permission to access the resources. Second, for interactive users and the planner user types, access permission that is specifically assigned to the users. Now, like we have seen, we have different types of users. So according to their usage, they will be given the access permission. Then access assignment that are acquired by belonging to the group. Access assignment, it will be provided that if you are a part of this particular group, if you are a part of marketing group, you are being allowed to access these resources. If you are the part of this accounting department, you can access those resources. So if you are part of a group, you can be assigned, you can be allocated with those resources. You can be given access to those resources. Then we have the parent level assignment. For example, to a parent member or to the folders. So that is known as parent level assignment, where there is a parent, he will do the assignment or will provide the access to various things who are within himself, who are part of that thing. So parent will give the access to the various resources to the children. So that is how the parent level assignment it is being done. Like the head of the marketing team, he may give access to certain resources to the people who are working below him, who are working under him. So that is known as parent level assignment. So this way access rights, they are being given. These are the permission which are given to the individual users to write, to modify, to delete or to access the various resources of your company.